In this video, I'm going to be redrawing my childhood comic art but as an adult. So instead of using crayons or colored pencils, I'll be using big boy art tools like my Pro Drawing tablet and Photoshop. The first image I'm redrawing is the cover of B-Man, my very first comic I made at the age of 11. I scanned the cover to get its digital version and then dropped the image into Photoshop. Now the first big problem I have is actually trying to figure out what 11-year-old me was thinking when making this, cause there's a lot. So how did I actually pull this off? I spent a few minutes analyzing it and finally managed to break it down into a few main elements. The foreground has the main character B-Man, who is now called Project N, on a rooftop or some kind of high point, looking down at something in the city. And there's an explosion. There's a villain in the sky, a B signal because your boy was a Batman fan, this sharp pointy building thing, and the title of the comic. I'm removing the villain in the sky because he's not in the current story for now. I'm also gonna remove the B signal because Project N doesn't have or need a B signal, but I'll keep the spotlight in the sky for nostalgia's sake. I jumped straight into illustrations with no pencils, no sketches or anything. I'm just going in raw.
What do you mean by that?
I'm on a time crunch here because I'm also working on the actual comic reboot, and I'm only doing this no planning thing for the foreground because A, I've drawn the character multiple times before, so I can skip steps now. B, the main thing I needed was Project N looking at the distance, and that's pretty simple. And C, I'm drawing digitally, so if I mess up, I can just hit Ctrl Z. I'm not the type of artist who sees a point in penciling digitally.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I decided that for my city background, I was just going to create the buildings in a separate window, but I would first just do the basic outline and shapes of the building before I decided to add in details. This would basically help speed up the entire process for the backgrounds. I later added in some windows, which was actually the easier part of the process because it's mostly stretching and skewing. Another method I know some comic artists use is 3D backgrounds, but that's a whole other skill set, and if you guys want to watch me try to learn 3D, let me know. So I messed up at some point because I forgot to add in this pointy building, which was in the original background over here, and it was a random building before, but now since the comic reboot is taking place in Nairobi, I decided to Google Britam Towers, an actual building in Nairobi, which I used as direct reference. I put it in Photoshop so that as I'm drawing it, I can get it accurately. Here's the OG B-Man cover, side by side with the new one that's just inks right now. I think it looks pretty similar to the original, but it's still missing something. Color. I started by using the overall color of dark blue in the image since the scene is nighttime. I then started adding in the coloring of the main character himself in the image. It's yellow since he is a B character. And since I already added in the strong blacks during the inking stage, the only thing that was kind of left was adding in these grays on the edges of him. And this was mostly to help him stand out from the rest of the background and the rest of the blacks, as well as also help with a future lighting effect I'm going to add to him after. I next had to figure out what I was actually going to do with these buildings, but the main decision was to make them brown because a lot of buildings in Nairobi are brown, including this one with this image called KICC. Come on, wait. I messed up again, and it was a few stages back. You see, in the original cover, as you can see here, there was actually an explosion, so I'm going to have to draw an explosion on a different tab, and then I'm going to find a way to be able to basically copy and paste this explosion that I've created and add it into this new image. That way I have more flexibility. Okay, now that I've fixed that, I'm basically just going to have to turn the buildings blue because I realized nighttime wouldn't make sense for the brown to still be visible since, it's nighttime. I added a new layer for the atmosphere in the background so that I can give this foggy look, because in real life, usually what happens is the further something is away from you, the more bluish it has of a tint and the more fuzzy it is. So that just gives, it's a small detail, but it gives the art more depth and more of a realistic feeling. I also decided to color in the explosions, added in a bit of white in the center because, it's brightest there at the center. That's where the most heat is during an explosion, so it's going to be whiter. I added a shadow that was more blue onto the character, and now is where the lighting effects start getting good. You see, now I can basically show that the bouncing of the light from the explosion is actually creating a shadow against him. This basically helps illustrate how bright the actual explosion's light is. I then started adding in some yellow hard light on the edges on him so that we can really sell that explosion lighting bouncing off of his body. I started just along the nose and the face, and then eventually in the forehead and the shoulders, and now I'm also adding in the spotlight at the back of his head because there was a spotlight in the original. It had a B signal, but like I mentioned, we're gonna get rid of that. Since there's a spotlight, there also needs to be a bit of that reflection of the light on the back of his head and his neck as well. So I'm just gonna add that over here, back of the neck. Make sure all of this is all consistent. And then the final thing was just mostly to add in a few glow touch-ups here and there, especially where there's light. And then I grabbed the new logo for the comic and basically add it into the image. Here's a look at the original comic cover I made at 11 with colored pencils. And here's a look at what it looks like now at the age of 23 with a digital tablet. The next image I'm recreating is the B-Man sequel I made at the age of 14. Now, obviously, my art made some huge progress from the version I made when I was 11 when you put them side by side like this. I still think I can give it some changes. For example, in this old version, Project 10 is basically just standing in front of some car wreckage and you have two villains coming to attack him from both sides. And he's directly in front of the KICC, which is Nairobi's most iconic building. Now, I don't think I'm going to do the two villains attacking him from both sides because I have an even better idea. You see, the cover is supposed to be a single image tease of the abilities of the main character and what to expect from the story. So since cover A is already just him looking all cool normally without showing off his powers per se, it's a bit more mysterious. I thought cover B should show off two of his biggest abilities, flight and electrokinesis. For those who don't know, electrokinesis is basically electrically powered telekinesis abilities, and Project N has those powers. Why does he have electricity powers? Well,
Because you're black!
actually, jokes aside, it's because it's inspired by bees in nature. Real life bees sadly do not pollinate using nectar guns while wearing leather jackets like in the bee movie. But how they pollinate is still pretty cool. The faster their wings flap, the more they produce an electrical charge that they use to attract pollen to them. I thought this would really translate well into my comic, so I gave Project 10 some electrokinesis abilities. But I haven't shown them off on a cover. I started by illustrating the pose I wanted him to be in. I wanted him to be in the air. So that's what I was thinking of mainly, and in a position that looked like he was lifting things with his hands. Like, I started drawing in some of his wings and then I added in the hexagon patterns before selecting around it and then duplicating the wings just so that both sides are symmetrical. I then also started working on the backgrounds. I started drawing in the pedestrian sidewalks, working on the vehicles that I was going to add in. I basically took them, worked on them on a different tab, and then I dragged and dropped them into the cover. And I kept everything on a separate layer so I could adjust everything easier. The final part was the colors. Now for that, I began with the flat work and then just adding in basic colors. I also started working on the shadows by creating a silhouette of the buildings in the background and then just turning them black, flipping them around, creating a skewed image version of them so that I could color around them. It looked good in the end, trust me. And then I started doing in the actual electricity and the electrokinetic abilities on Project 10 by adding in like an aura using a soft brush around him. And then I decided, you know what, I'll do that for the vehicles as well. When you combine the aura plus the electricity around the character, it really gives off this superpowered, overpowered look. So this is the original image before and this is the new image after. I did have a bit of an issue deciding between blue electricity or yellow electricity for Project 10 this time because I never realized how yellow could look. So I will put a poll out for you guys to decide on what's better between the two colors going forward. I think you guys, if you vote on the one, I'll pick the one you guys choose. And then also let me know which cover for volume 1 you think is better. Do you think it's cover A where he's looking down into the city, which is the throwback cover, original, or cover B? Let me know in the comments.